The next time you're stuck in a minor inconvenience, remember that centuries ago, people were subjected to torture methods designed to keep you alive as long as possible during your own execution. The human mind is infinitely creative, especially when it comes to inflicting suffering. It was the year 1596 when Ferenc Nadasdy first walked his wife Elizabeth Bathory through the dungeons beneath their castle in what is now modern-day Slovakia. The nobleman was teaching his young bride the family's tradition of disciplining servants, a tradition that would eventually expose one of history's most disturbing chapters of aristocratic cruelty. What began as simple beatings evolved into something much darker when Ferenc showed Elizabeth a torture technique called star kicking. A servant would be laid on their back, their ankles and wrists bound with rope, then pulled so tight that their limbs formed a star shape. The torturer would then methodically kick the exposed and stretched abdomen, causing internal hemorrhaging while leaving virtually no external marks. The victim would die slowly from internal bleeding, sometimes taking days. Ferenc died in 1604, but Elizabeth had developed not just a tolerance for torture, but an insatiable appetite for it. Court testimonies later revealed that she would insert needles under servants' fingernails or apply burning hotkeys to their faces for minor infractions like dropping a handkerchief. You don't learn this in history classes, but aristocrats throughout Europe maintained private torture chambers where they could exercise absolute power without consequences. But personal sadism was just one branch of torture's dark tree. Institutionalized torture reached its zenith during the early modern period with the development of specialized tools and methods designed by engineers and physicians who applied their knowledge of human anatomy to maximize suffering while preventing premature death. Take the Pear of Anguish, a mechanical device shaped roughly like a pear that could be inserted into any orifice of the body, mouth, rectum, or vagina. Once inside, turning a key would cause the petals to slowly expand, causing excruciating pain as delicate tissues were torn apart. The device was frequently used to extract confessions, with interrogators promising relief only after the desired information was provided. Most victims would confess to anything, true or not, to end the torment. What's particularly disturbing is the precision engineering that went into these instruments. The Pear of Anguish featured a sophisticated ratcheting mechanism that allowed for incremental expansion. The torturer could increase the pain gradually, carefully calibrating suffering to extract information without killing the subject. These weren't crude tools. They were precision instruments designed by educated men. Perhaps most terrifying was the chair of spikes, commonly known as the iron chair. Contrary to popular imagery, the most effective versions didn't feature dramatic protruding spikes that would quickly kill the victim. Instead, they used hundreds of tiny, blunt protrusions that would not pierce the skin immediately. The victim would be strapped to the chair with bands across the chest, the head, the arms, and the legs, making movement impossible. As time passed, the pressure of the body against these dull spikes would gradually break the skin, creating hundreds of small wounds. The chair was often heated from below, causing the metal to expand and the wounds to widen. The victim would slowly lose blood while experiencing excruciating pain from both the penetrating spikes and burning heat. The genius of the design was that a victim could survive for days in this condition. Court records from 16th century Nuremberg document one execution that lasted 3 days and nights, with witnesses reporting that the victim's screams could be heard throughout the town until their vocal cords ruptured from overuse. The psychological torture of anticipating each new wave of pain often broke people faster than the physical agony itself. Water torture achieved similar psychological devastation with minimal technology. In the technique known as water cure, the victim would be strapped to a board, their head positioned lower than their feet. Their nostrils would be plugged, and a cloth placed over their mouth. The torturer would then pour water over the cloth, creating a controlled drowning sensation. What made this method particularly horrific was how it exploited the body's innate survival mechanisms. Each time water entered the airway, the gag reflex would trigger violently. The victim would experience all the terror of drowning while remaining conscious. When the cloth was momentarily removed, the desperate gasping for air provided only seconds of relief before the process began again. Dutch East India Company logs from 1622 document this technique being used on captured pirates, with sessions lasting up to 8 hours. The human body can survive this treatment for days while experiencing what survivors described as dying 1,000 deaths. The technique was so effective at breaking the human spirit that it has been continuously reinvented throughout history, appearing in various forms across cultures and centuries. But perhaps the most sophisticated torture method was developed in the Persian Empire, later adopted and refined throughout medieval Europe, the blood eagle. This execution method involved cutting open the victim's back, breaking the ribs away from the spine, and pulling the lungs out through the wounds to create the appearance of bloody wings. Most historical accounts suggest this was performed while the victim was still alive. Recent forensic analysis of remains from suspected blood eagle victims suggests something even more disturbing. Evidence of surgical precision in the initial incisions indicates medical knowledge was applied to ensure the victim remained conscious as long as possible. The torturers would carefully avoid severing major blood vessels while exposing the lungs, then administer stimulants to prevent the victim from losing consciousness. The procedure could last hours, with death coming only when the lungs, exposed to air, finally cease functioning. What's particularly chilling about these torture methods is the documentation surrounding them. These weren't secretive practices, they were public spectacles with detailed procedural manuals. The Malleus Maleficarum, published in 1487, while infamous for other reasons, contained precise instructions for various torture techniques, including diagrams and recommendations for maximizing suffering while keeping the victim alive. These public tortures served a dual purpose, extracting information and deterring crime through exemplary punishment. Executions would be announced days in advance, with spectators traveling from neighboring towns to witness the event. Children would be brought to watch, with parents believing the experience would instill moral values and respect for authority. In London's Tyburn, where public executions were held until 1783, vendors would sell souvenirs and refreshments while families picnicked nearby. Seats with the best view commanded premium prices, sometimes costing a week's wages for an average worker. The festivities surrounding these events speak to how normalized extreme violence had become in daily life. The most disturbing revelation about historical torture may be how it shaped our modern understanding of human physiology. Many early anatomical studies were conducted on torture victims, with physicians observing and documenting the body's response to various stressors. The 16th century anatomist Andreas Vesalius frequently attended executions, receiving permission to dissect the bodies afterward, but also observing the physiological reactions during torture. His groundbreaking work, De Humani Corporis Fabrica, contains observations clearly derived from witnessing torture, including detailed descriptions of muscle spasms during extreme pain and the body's compensatory mechanisms during blood loss. Modern medical knowledge about pain pathways, shock, and trauma response can trace its lineage directly to these observations of torture victims. When we examine surgical anesthesia today, we're benefiting from knowledge initially gathered by watching people suffer. The understanding of how much trauma a body can endure before shutting down came from carefully documented torture sessions where the goal was to keep the victim conscious and suffering as long as possible. Perhaps most chilling is how these techniques never truly disappeared. They've been modernized, sanitized, and reclassified, but the fundamental principles remain in use. The psychological insights gained from centuries of torture have been incorporated into modern interrogation techniques that leave no physical marks while achieving similar results. The true horror of historical torture isn't just the physical pain it caused, but how it reveals the darkest capabilities of human creativity when freed from moral constraints. These weren't acts of impulsive cruelty, but carefully engineered systems designed by society's most educated minds to maximize suffering while maintaining the veneer of justice and order. Next time you read a sanitized account of medieval justice or see a stylized torture chamber in a period drama, remember that the reality was far more calculated, systematic, and enduring than we're comfortable acknowledging. The shadow of these practices continues to influence our world in ways we rarely recognize, and perhaps that's the most disturbing legacy of all.